Andrew Jackson, the seventh President of the United States from 1829 to 1837, remains an important figure in American history. His presidency left a significant impact, but was also stained with controversy, mainly due to policies such as the Indian Removal Act. Enacted in 1830, this legislation authorized the forced relocation of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands to territories west of the Mississippi River. Rooted in Jackson's belief in manifest destiny, it aimed to fulfill America's perceived destiny of westward expansion at the expense of indigenous peoples. The consequences of the Indian Removal Act were catastrophic, leading to the Trail of Tears, a painful journey during which thousands of Native Americans, including the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole, suffered immense hardship, loss, and death. This tragic chapter in American history inflicted irreparable damage on Native American communities, highlighting the severe human toll of Jackson's policies. In this video, we'll explore the lasting effects of the Trail of Tears, examining the complexities of American history and honoring the resilience of those who endured unimaginable hardship. Before we continue, please support us by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on our new updates. Early life and ascension to power. Andrew Jackson, the seventh President of the United States, emerged from humble beginnings to become a significant figure in American history. Born on March 15, 1767, in the backwoods of the Carolinas, Jackson's childhood was marked by adversity and hardship. Orphaned at a young age and raised by relatives, he learned the value of resilience and self-reliance from an early age. Jackson's upbringing in the frontier regions of the Carolinas instilled in him a fierce sense of independence and a deep connection to the land. Despite a limited formal education, he possessed a sharp intellect and a keen sense of ambition. His early experiences witnessing the injustices faced by settlers and Native Americans alike would later shape his political worldview. At the age of 13, Jackson entered into the American Revolutionary War, serving as a courier for the local militia. This early exposure to military life sparked a passion for service and instilled in him a sense of duty to his country. Although his mother's death shortly after that left him an orphan, Jackson's resolve only hardened, driving him to seek his fortune in the newly formed United States. Jackson's military career flourished during the War of 1812, where he earned recognition for his leadership and bravery on the battlefield. Rising swiftly through the ranks, he distinguished himself in engagements such as the Battle of Horseshoe Bend and the pivotal Battle of New Orleans. It was during this conflict that Jackson earned the nickname Old Hickory for his unyielding resolve and tough demeanor. Following his military successes, Jackson's popularity soared, propelling him onto the national stage. In 1815, he was hailed as a national hero for his decisive victory at New Orleans, solidifying his reputation as a military leader of unparalleled skill and courage. Jackson's rise to prominence was further cemented by his involvement in the First Seminole War, where he demonstrated his willingness to defy orders in pursuit of what he deemed necessary for the nation's security. Despite his military acclaim, Jackson's ambitions extended beyond the battlefield. Inspired by the ideals of democracy and the promise of the American dream, he embarked on a new chapter of his life in politics. In 1822, Jackson was elected to represent Tennessee in the U.S. Senate, beginning his political career. His populist appeal and commitment to the commoners' interests quickly garnered him a devoted following, positioning him as a formidable force in American politics. Key events, such as the contentious presidential election of 1824, further fueled Jackson's political ambitions as he vowed to challenge the corrupt elite and champion the cause of the ordinary citizen. His subsequent election as president in 1828 signaled a shift in American politics, ushering in an era of unprecedented populism and reform. Jackson's presidency and the Indian Removal Act, Andrew Jackson's presidency, spanning from 1829 to 1837, left an indelible mark on American history. A war hero and a populist leader, Jackson's tenure was defined by both triumphs and controversies, with one of the most contentious policies being the Indian Removal Act of 1830. In 1829, Jackson assumed the highest office in the land and was inaugurated as the 7th President of the United States. His presidency heralded a new era in American politics, marked by a genuine belief in expanding the powers of the executive branch and championing the interests of the common people. Jackson's rise to power was propelled by his military prowess, having gained national recognition for his leadership during the War of 1812, most notably at the Battle of New Orleans. During his office, Jackson implemented several significant policies to shape the nation's future. His administration prioritized initiatives such as dismantling the National Bank, which he viewed as a symbol of elitist control over the economy. Jackson's continuous opposition to the bank led to its eventual demise, reflecting his commitment to decentralizing financial power and promoting a more egalitarian economy. One of the most controversial actions of Jackson's presidency was enacting the Indian Removal Act. This legislation authorized the forcible relocation of Native American tribes residing in the southeastern United States to territories west of the Mississippi River. The primary motivation behind the act was to open up valuable land for white settlement and expand the agricultural interests of the burgeoning nation. A combination of economic interests, racial prejudice, and territorial expansionism shaped the context surrounding the Indian Removal Act. Jackson and his supporters believed that the relocation of Native American tribes was essential for the nation's progress and prosperity, viewing indigenous peoples as obstacles to be removed rather than equal citizens deserving of rights and protections. Economically, the fertile lands inhabited by Native American tribes held immense potential for agricultural development, particularly in the lucrative cotton industry. Additionally, the expansion of slavery in the South further fueled the demand for new territories suitable for plantation agriculture, driving the push for indigenous removal. The Indian Removal Act sparked intense political debate and controversy during Andrew Jackson's presidency. While proponents argued for the economic benefits and national interests of westward expansion, opponents vehemently condemned the act as a violation of human rights and a betrayal of America's founding principle. Advocates of the Indian Removal Act, including President Jackson and his supporters in Congress, insisted that the legislation was a pragmatic solution to the perceived Indian problem. They contended that relocating Native American tribes to lands west of the Mississippi River would facilitate peaceful coexistence between indigenous peoples and white settlers, thus averting potential conflicts over land and resources. Additionally, proponents highlighted the economic advantages of opening up vast areas of fertile land for white settlement and agricultural development, particularly in the southern states. However, the act faced fierce opposition from various quarters, including humanitarian activists, religious leaders, and some political figures. Critics condemned the forced removal of indigenous peoples from their ancestral homelands as a grave injustice and a violation of their sovereignty. They argued that such actions contradicted the principles of equality and liberty enshrined in the Constitution and undermined America's moral standing on the world stage. Moreover, opponents denounced the government's disregard for treaties and agreements previously made with Native American tribes, accusing policymakers of breaching trust and perpetuating systemic oppression. The implementation of the Indian Removal Act had profound and devastating effects on the Native American tribes targeted for relocation, including the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole. Among the most affected were the Cherokee Nation, who inhabited the fertile lands of present-day Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. Despite their efforts to assimilate into Euro-American society and adopt agricultural practices, the Cherokee faced relentless pressure from white settlers eager to acquire their territory. The forced removal of the Cherokee, known as the Trail of Tears, resulted in the displacement of thousands of men, women, and children from their home. Many perished due to exposure, starvation, and disease during the grueling journey westward, leaving behind a trail of unimaginable suffering and loss. Similarly, the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations, located in present-day Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, experienced profound upheaval as a result of the Indian Removal Act. Despite signing treaties with the United States government to secure their territorial rights, both tribes were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands and compelled to embark on arduous journeys to unfamiliar territories in present-day Oklahoma. The toll of this forced migration was staggering, with thousands of Choctaw and Chickasaw individuals perishing along the trail, their communities fragmented, and their cultural heritage endangered. The Creek and Seminole nations, situated in present-day Georgia and Florida, also faced displacement and dispossession under the Indian Removal Act. Despite mounting resistance efforts, including the Seminole Wars, both tribes ultimately succumbed to the relentless pressure exerted by federal troops and white settlers. The forced removal of the Creek and Seminole peoples led to widespread suffering and dislocation, with many individuals losing their lives in the process of relocation. Severe exposure, starvation, and disease ravaged tribes during their forced migration to present-day Oklahoma. The first Cherokees to relocate, approximately 2,000 men, women, and children, split into 4 groups in 1837. They traveled westward by boat, following the winding paths of the Tennessee, Ohio, Mississippi, and Arkansas rivers. The journey for these voluntary exiles was as short as a month, and deaths numbered less than 24. Conditions proved far worse for the Cherokee, evicted from their homes at gunpoint by federal troops dispatched by President Martin Van Buren. Beginning on May 26, 1838, soldiers under the command of General Winfield Scott rounded up the majority of the Cherokee, along with 1,500 slaves and free blacks, forced them to leave behind most of their possessions, and herded them into wooden stockades and internment camps. Men working in the fields were arrested and driven to the stockades, recalled Private John Burnett, an interpreter. Women were dragged from their homes by soldiers, whose language they could not understand. Children were often separated from their parents and driven into the stockades with the ski for a blanket and the earth for a pillow, and often the old and infirm were prodded with bayonets to hasten them to the stockades. Reverend Daniel Buttrick, a missionary who had ministered in the Cherokee Territory for 20 years, wrote, "From their first arrest, they were obliged to live very much like brute animals, and during their travels were obliged at night to lie down on the naked ground, in the open air, exposed to wind and rain, and herd together, men, women, and children, like droves of hogs, and in this way many are hastening to a premature grave. Due to the poor sanitation of the internment camps, deadly diseases such as whooping cough, measles, and dysentery spread among the Cherokee. Extreme weather led to deaths. In June 1838, 3 military-led migrations departed present-day Chattanooga, Tennessee, to journey westward by land and water. At gunpoint, the Cherokee were loaded onto boats that, according to Buttrick, had little, if any, more room or accommodations than would be allowed to swine taken to market. Stifling summer heat and a record drought proved deadly, as drinking water for people and horses became scarce. While only 21 Cherokee died in the 4 voluntary migrations, more than 200 perished in the 3 military-led expeditions. The sweltering temperatures forced the suspension of the relocations, and when they resumed that fall, Scott agreed to let the Cherokee oversee the rest of the departure. Under the agreement, the remaining Cherokee were divided into 13 groups of approximately 1,000 people, each that Cherokee conductors led. Federal soldiers could only act as observers as a Cherokee police force kept order. These Cherokee-managed migrations were primarily land crossings, averaging 10 miles daily across various routes. Some groups, however, took more than 4 months to make the 800-mile journey. The 3-mile-long Cherokee caravans required days to make river crossings and included 1 wagon for approximately every 20 people, while the oldest, youngest, and sickest exiles rode in wagons. Most crossed on foot, slogging through mud and wagons. Snow, even aged females, apparently nearly ready to drop into the grave, were traveling with heavy burdens attached to the back, recorded one traveler who encountered the Cherokee in Kentucky. The Cherokee were ill-equipped for the grueling hike. "We had no shoes," noted Trail of Tears survivor Rebecca Nugent, and those that wore anything wore moccasins made of deer hide. They were also malnourished, sustaining themselves on a daily menu of salt, pork, and flour. "The people got so tired of eating salt pork on the journey that my father would walk through the woods as we traveled, hunting for turkeys and deer, which we brought into camp to feed us," Nugent recalled. Scott's summertime delay caused the Cherokee to march into the teeth of one of the worst winters on record. "We are compelled to cut through the ice to get water for ourselves and animals," wrote Commissary Agent Nathan Davis. Ice flowing down the Mississippi River made it too treacherous to cross, forcing the Cherokee to camp and sleep in deep snow and ice for weeks. One group took nearly 3 months to cover the 65 miles in southern Illinois, between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. Dysentery and diarrhea that tore through the campsites and the harsh winter conditions claimed the lives of many, particularly children and the elderly, who were buried in makeshift graves along the way. The last of the Cherokee completed the Trail of Tears in March 1839. Decades later, a Confederate soldier who participated in the forced migration recalled, "I fought through the Civil War and saw men shot to pieces and slaughtered by the thousands. But the Cherokee removal was the cruelest work I ever knew." The implementation of the Indian Removal Act, the Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed into law by President Andrew Jackson, marked a dark chapter in American history. This legislation authorized the forced relocation of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands to territories west of the Mississippi River. The act was driven by the government's desire for land expansion and the belief in the superiority of white settlers over indigenous people. The implementation of the Indian Removal Act led to the tragic and brutal forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans. Under the pretense of treaties and agreements, government agents pressured tribes to sign away their lands in exchange for promises of compensation and protection. However, these promises were often broken, and tribes faced violence, coercion, and deceit in the process. The Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole were among the most heavily affected tribes. They were uprooted from their homelands and forced to march long distances to unfamiliar territories in what became known as the Trail of Tears. Families were torn apart, communities were devastated, and countless lives were lost due to harsh conditions, starvation, and disease along the treacherous journey. Among the tribes affected by the Indian Removal Act, the Cherokee nations stood out for their determined resistance against forced relocation. The Cherokee had adopted many aspects of European culture and established a sophisticated society with its government, written language, and educational system in what is now Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. Led by Principal Chief John Ross, the Cherokee Nation refused to comply with the demands of the United States government. They argued they were a sovereign nation with the right to self-governance and control over their ancestral lands. The Cherokee also sought legal recourse to challenge the constitutionality of the Indian Removal Act. Their legal battles culminated in the landmark Supreme Court case, Cherokee Nation v. Georgia, in 1831. In this case, the Cherokee Nation argued that they were not subject to the laws of the state of Georgia, which sought to enforce their removal. They contended that they were a distinct political community with a government recognized by treaties with the United States. However, the Supreme Court's decision failed to deliver justice to the Cherokee. In a controversial ruling, Chief Justice John Marshall dismissed the case because the Cherokee Nation did not have standing as a foreign nation to sue in federal court. Marshall acknowledged the Cherokee as a domestic-dependent nation, but denied them full sovereignty. Despite this setback, the Cherokee resisted removal efforts through peaceful protests, diplomatic negotiations, and appeals to the federal government. They also sought support from sympathetic allies, including missionaries, activists, and members of Congress who opposed Jackson's policies. Ultimately, the Cherokee Nation's efforts to resist removal were in vain. In 1838, under the threat of military force, thousands of Cherokee were forcibly removed from their homes and herded into internment camps before being forced to march westward along the Trail of Tears. Legacy of Andrew Jackson and the Trail of Tears. Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, left a dark mark on American history, largely due to his controversial policies, notably the Indian Removal Act. Examining the legacy of Andrew Jackson and the Trail of Tears reveals profound lessons for modern society. Jackson's presidency is often remembered for his forceful actions in expanding American territory and asserting federal authority. However, the Indian Removal Act stands out as a stark reminder of the injustices faced by Native American tribes. Historians and scholars continue to debate Jackson's actions and motivations, questioning whether political expediency, economic interests, or genuine ideological beliefs drove them. One aspect of this ongoing debate revolves around Jackson's portrayal as a populist hero versus a symbol of oppression. While some view him as a champion of the commoner, others highlight his role in perpetuating injustice against indigenous peoples. Understanding this complexity is important in assessing Jackson's legacy and its impact on American society. The Trail of Tears serves as a haunting testament to the devastating consequences of the Indian Removal Act. Thousands of Native Americans, including Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole tribes, were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands and relocated to unfamiliar territory. The journey westward was marked by suffering, hardship, and loss, with estimates suggesting that thousands perished along the way. Native American communities have long strived to preserve their cultural heritage and seek justice for past injustices inflicted upon them. Despite facing immense challenges, they have demonstrated resilience and determination in preserving their traditions, languages, and sacred lands. Efforts to raise awareness about the Trail of Tears and honor the memory of those who suffered have become integral to their ongoing struggle for recognition and reconciliation. The Trail of Tears serves as a painful reminder of the consequences of unchecked power, racism, and the marginalization of minority groups. It highlights the importance of confronting uncomfortable truths about America's past and working toward healing and reconciliation. Moreover, the Trail of Tears highlights the enduring challenges faced by indigenous communities in the United States and around the world. The struggle for land rights, sovereignty, and cultural preservation remains ongoing, with indigenous peoples advocating for their rights and dignity in the face of ongoing marginalization and discrimination. In conclusion, we've journeyed through the life of Andrew Jackson and the harrowing tale of the Trail of Tears, a chapter in American history detailed with tragedy and injustice. We've learned about Jackson's presidency, marked by the controversial Indian Removal Act, which forcibly displaced Native American tribes from their ancestral lands. It's crucial to remember the profound impact of the Trail of Tears, not just as a historical event, but as a reminder of the human cost of policies driven by greed and prejudice. The suffering endured by Native American communities serves as a reminder of the importance of empathy, justice, and accountability in governance. As we reflect on this dark chapter, it's essential to recognize the resilience and strength of Native American peoples in the face of adversity. Their stories deserve to be heard, their experiences honored, and their voices amplified. Together, let's strive to build a future where the lessons of the Trail of Tears are not forgotten, but catalyze empathy, understanding, and reconciliation. Only by confronting the past with honesty and humility can we hope to create a more just and inclusive society for all. On that note, we end today's episode. You can drop your comments below. We would love to know your thoughts on this important topic. We encourage you to continue learning, questioning, and engaging in meaningful discussions about justice and human rights in our society. Together, we can strive towards a more just and equitable world for all. Thank you for joining us once again. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button. See you in our next video.